Yeah, I'll switch to English to introduce the first of our College of Europe talks. This is a series of talks, informal online talks that we inaugurate today with a special guest, for me a friend, Commissioner Paolo Gentiloni, former a lot of things, a former Prime Minister of Italy, Foreign Minister of Italy, but also with a long political and not only political career, that is joining us today for this 1 hour online conversation with the students. I would just say a few words about the format. It's supposed to be a very informal conversation, so no lecture, not an academic approach, but rather an informal conversation that is, though, web streamed on the College of Europe website. So it is not off the record, it's on the record, it's public. And we have an audience that is following live on the website, and we have the students connected that will, after an introduction from Commissioner Gentiloni, ask questions and make comments. In total, we foresee to have 1 hour of conversation. As I said, informal, free-flowing, we can address many different issues, and the idea is that as our students are limited in what they can physically do in this academic year, to offer them as much as possible online opportunities to get in touch with high-level personalities as Commissioner Gentiloni is. And I'm really grateful to you, Paolo, for joining us today. I see that you are in the Berlaymont office in Brussels. Here in Bruges, we are fully online. And again, I thank you for your availability. I think we couldn't think of a better start for our talks. Just let me mention that we will have other talks, more or less one every week, with personalities of different backgrounds, covering different aspects of what our students study at the college. So, Paolo Gentiloni needs no presentation from my side, and I even find it a bit strange to address him in English and online. I think it is extremely interesting today to exchange with you, Paolo. Well, not only because I guess at a certain moment we'll talk also about the results of the US election and how this affects the transatlantic partnership, but you just presented the autumn economic forecasts. You dealt with the European Commission and the European Union work to address the economic impact of the pandemic, recovery funds. So I think that this is an extraordinary opportunity for us to get a bit of an insight from you on basically the files on which we've been working in this strange, intense months that are also your first year almost in office, because you started as a commissioner almost 1 year ago exactly. So I thank you for joining us. I'll give you immediately the floor. We'll listen to you, and then I will open the floor to our students for their questions and comments. Grazie.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Rector, Federica, and good afternoon to all of you that are following us, this conversation online. Of course, I'm really pleased and honored to be here. I understand it's the first of several talks that the College of Europe will have, and I thank my not old, but my long-time friend Federica for this invitation. We all know that we are in extremely difficult and challenging times. We had indeed today also some good news, as you probably know, that there was an announcement coming from a couple of big pharma industries of the effectiveness of the vaccine that they are testing. Apparently very high effectiveness, and this very announcement is producing also some very strong consequences in the stock markets, because of course it is giving a little bit of hope and of certainty in such a difficult situation. But having said this, we all know that the vaccine will be there next year, and also the distribution of the vaccine will be a challenge, from not only a logistic challenge, but also a social challenge, a challenge between our own countries in Europe, other countries that are probably less capable to have big procurement of vaccines. So, of course, the fact that the horizon of having a vaccine next year is strengthening, and this gives a little bit of optimism in a difficult situation. Difficult it is because, as you know, the forecast for our economies is very negative, and this is consequence of something more negative, which is the situation of this second wave, the death tolls that is causing in Europe, and the stress again on our healthcare system, hospitals, and also the uncertainty from a social point of view of the new wave of measures of lockdown that are not accepted in the same not easy, but in the same way that in spring. It's we have a lot of more difficulties now in several member states to have these measures accepted. So a difficult situation with consequences on our economy. By the way, I never thought that a so-called V-shaped recovery would have been possible. V-shaped means that you have a very hard drop in the economy, and then a very strong and decisive rebound, bringing rapidly the situation where it were. Indeed, we had a very strong fall in our economy, a very strong drop, but the recovery is much lower, and our forecast is that we will be back to the pre-pandemic level of our GDP between the end of 2022 and 2023. So it will be a long way to the recovery. And we will have long-lasting scars of this crisis. From 2 points of view, one, divergence among European countries, because the crisis was affecting everybody, what we call an external crisis, but the consequences are not affecting every member state at the same level. So we will have the risk of increasing divergence, and we are trying to managing this risk. And then we will have increasing also inequalities, because the crisis is not affecting everyone in the same way. Of course, more precarious jobs are now more at risk. Young workers doing precarious jobs are more at risk. Women employment, especially in countries like the one we are coming from, Federica and me, women employment is under pressure, of course, in this new situation. So in this framework of deep crisis severe impact from the healthcare point of view, but also economic point of view, risk of divergence, inequalities. I think we have to admit that the European reaction was fast and rather strong. The main decisions were taken in the middle of March, exactly 3 weeks after the discovery of this pandemic in Europe, in northern Italy, and then in other areas of Europe. It was very strong right at the beginning with the special programs of the ECB, with the decision to suspend our fiscal rules and our state aid rules. And these three decisions allowed member states to react very strongly with strong firepower, to spend without consequences on financial markets, and to put in place guarantees to help their companies with temporary different rules for state aid. So I think these decisions that were taken very rapidly are still crucial for the period we are in. Then we began in April and May the period of taking common decisions on common fiscal tools. And as you probably know, we had at the beginning a first package decided by the finance ministers, and then the big one that now we call Next Generation EU, proposed by the Commission and delivered after a long-lasting discussion at the end of July by the European Council. I'm not entering in details. We can do this if there are questions on this, but the strong overall message of this is that the Commission is issuing common debt for common purposes. And this is absolutely unprecedented. It will bring consequences, among them the need to increase the so-called own resources of our budget, because we, of course, have to repay this common debt in a common way. It would be a paradox to have a common issuance of debt and then repay it, asking member states their contribution. And of course, this increasing of own resources will not be so easy. All this package, which is a very huge one, composed by grants and loans, but at the end, a package with above 1 trillion of euros with different measures. The aim of this package is not only and not so much to bring again the situation of our economies and our societies, so to say, back to normal, to the situation we were in before the pandemic, because of course there is the need to reopen, to restart, and to go back to normality, but at the same time there is the need to seize this opportunity to change things that need to be changed. And this is the main goal, especially of the biggest of these funds, which is called Recovery and Resilience Facility, 700 billion euro, with the goal of steering also not only the recovery, but the transformation of our economy towards a more sustainable, a more resilient, and a more digitalized, competitive, innovative framework. If this works, if this next generation EU, if this recovery package will work, I think that indeed it will be a game changer in our European building, because of course this is in itself an extraordinary decision, not a permanent one, but at the same time it is giving an example of how the fiscal policy can work hand in hand with the monetary policy to strengthen our European building. As you know, the European building is rather not complete from this point of view, because we have a common currency, at least for 19 countries, and a common monetary policy, but we have 19 or 27 different fiscal policies. Having a common fiscal tool, and such a big one, means giving to our fiscal policy for the first time some firepower, and this can be indeed, if it works, a game changer. My final remark, Federica, would be, if you agree, on the general context where this strong response, or European response, is working. So in such a difficult time, I think that the EU showed resilience and capacity to make bolder decisions. And what happened last week could give to this potentially stronger path for the European Union a more favorable environment. What will the Joe Biden election change in the situation? Well, I'm not entering in all the aspects. For many of them, Federica is much more informed than I am. But I think in some issues, for sure, the new US administration will change things, and for good. I will mention particularly 3 things. One is, of course, climate change. We, the new European Commission, choose this issue of the Green Deal as our identity profiling issue since the beginning in December last year, before the pandemic. And then we very boldly decided not to put it in a pause, but to relaunch the process even during the pandemic. So we increased the ambition of our targets for the Green Deal during the pandemic, target of emissions, target of green bonds, thresholds for the recovery plans of green investments, etc., etc., etc. And this appeared a little bit like something of an avant-garde in the European Commission side. But then we saw some messages coming from Asia in the last month, China, Japan, South Korea, and South Africa, by the way. And now this is for sure something where the new US administration will change things. The Paris Agreement, climate change, etc. We will have changes, very important one, on the pandemic issue, because of course the new administration will give to the fight against COVID-19 much more importance than the previous one. And third, I am quite optimistic on the fact that relation with EU and Europe from a even cultural point of view will be relaunched by Joe Biden, who is by definition a multilateralist. Something will not change. I don't think that US attitude towards China or Russia will change substantially after the new elections. And then finally, we have a question mark on the issues I am working on the economic issues, because the internal agenda of the new US administration will be very strongly influenced also by the political landscape. You know that the results in the Senate are still partly depending on the runoffs that will take place in Georgia in January the 5th. But in any case, we will have a strongly divided country, and we will see if what would be strongly needed, a big stimulus package coming from the United States, will indeed be supported by this divided landscape. So something will change for sure, something probably, but this is my view, will not change substantially in the global geopolitics. And for the economic packages, many things are connected to the evolution of the internal landscape of a divided America, which is still divided after the election, despite the strong result of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And that's all from my side, Federica. So I'm very happy if there are comments and or questions.
Grazie mille, Paolo. Thank you so much for this tour d'horizon, quite complete about the work that you have done, you have led, I have to say, and the Commission has done, managing also to build consensus on some very, I would say, innovative, courageous, and as you pointed out very rightly, very fast measures that were introduced at the European Union level. I know by experience, many times we complain about the European Union reaction being fast and being slow and complex. I think that in this time you really managed to lead a very fast and a comprehensive and ambitious reaction, which is quite remarkable. We do have comments. I would like also to thank you before I give voice to our students reading their questions. I would also like to thank you for your comments on the result of the US elections. You're not only someone that has followed this for your institutional roles just before getting to Brussels, having been the foreign minister of Italy, but also you're a longtime friend of the United States. And this passion is clearly evident when you talk about that, and I think that maybe we can come back to this towards the end of our conversation. I will now, if you are fine with that, I will maybe read a couple of questions together so that you can, or if you prefer, I can do one by one. We have a few of them. I can put two together. Two that come from the same student, is a very motivated and committed student I know personally from Estonia, from the economic department, no surprise. His first question is, how concerned should we be with the growing government debt across the EU 27? What can be done to reduce government's debt in the European Union member states in the long run? Is it necessary in general to try to reduce government's debt in a post-pandemic EU economy? And his second question, I think it's always from him, from Jan, from Estonia. Do we need an industrial policy in the European Union in order to be able to compete with subsidized sectors and companies from the United States and China and create European champions, even if it might distort competition within European Union internal markets? This is an everlasting and returning question that I'm sure Margrethe Vestager will address eagerly. Paolo, that's for you now.
Yes, thank you. Well, of course, the issue of high debt didn't disappear in this situation. For sure, we will have an increase of the level of debt. This year, we will have in the euro area an average of 103% of debt to GDP ratio, which is an average in the euro area. And according to our forecast, this will slightly increase, not decrease, in 2021, and then begin to enter in a gradual path of diminution, of downsizing this debt. By the way, we should be aware of the fact that this tendency is not at all a European one. If we look to the OECD countries, the level of debt this year will be even higher than the one of the euro area. So we are continuing to encourage member states to support their economies as much as needed and as long as it is needed, because we know that we can't risk to withdraw prematurely supportive measures. If we withdraw prematurely supportive measures, we risk to strengthen the tendency to a double-dip recession. And we know that we made these mistakes in the past, and we should try not to repeat them in an even deeper crisis as the one we are living in. Having said all this, of course, encouraging member states to a supportive fiscal stance doesn't mean that all sorts of expenditures are considered in a positive way. We are also encouraging member states to look in the medium term to the sustainability of high debt, and so to avoid, as long as possible, to introduce new expenditure that have a permanent burden on budgets. It is not always easy to distinguish these kind of expenditures, but this is our message. So first, support your economy as long as it is needed, as much as it is needed. Second, in doing this, consider the fact that in the medium term, the path of the debt should return to a diminution in the medium term. Industrial policy, as Federica said, is of course a discussion coming from years, But now we have, I think, the chance and the need also to build a new balance, because of course, among the consequences of this crisis, there is the need to have a little bit shorter value chains, to understand how we can be competitive in future-oriented areas of our economies. And I think that part of this Next Generation EU program is also targeted to common projects, from the clean hydrogen to quantum computing to other very advanced programs. We need a balance, because this cannot mean that we are leaving our model based on open economy and competition in the single market. This principle will remain, but the new balance means that we should keep this principle and at the same time encourage common projects that capable to strengthen the European competitiveness. Thank you.
Grazie, Paolo. We have a lot of questions now, and I will try to read at least 2 or 3 at the same time, one after the other, so that you can try to address them all. And first of all, thank you for the answer on behalf of Jan that helped us break the ice. So I have now a question from Cornelius. Dear Commissioner Gentiloni, thank you for sharing your views with us students from the College of Europe. I was wondering, has COVID-19 changed the investment focus of InvestEU, and if yes, in what way? And then it goes on, if I'm not wrong, it's always Cornelius. Do you see the current crisis as an opportunity rather than a threat for the transition of our economy towards carbon neutrality? Then, if you allow me, I would also read the question from Louis. What happens if the grants under Recovery and Resilience Facility instruments also take 6 months to arrive to the countries when the needs are already in an aggravated stage at this moment? How can the EU be faster? And then it continues, it's always Louis. The SURE instrument was proposed by the Commission on April the 2nd, but the money only started to arrive to the member states, some of them in October, so 6 months later. Do you consider that this period of time is rapid? I think this was actually the first part of the question, and then it continues with the second part. No, it continues still further. Sorry. No, it's okay. Yes, I read it the other way around. The second part comes first, but the content is clear. The point is, when does the money arrive, and is this fast enough? If I can, I maybe read another one. That is, how could the European Union help southern EU countries to avoid hard shocks that they have during every crisis, and at the same time to overcome the inequality between the North-South gap? I will leave the others for a third round. To you, Paolo.
Yes, grazie. Well, Cornelius, the InvestEU program, which is, as you know, the new phases of the Juncker plan mechanism, with some more strength, because we are involving not only the European Investment Bank, but also national promotion banks in supporting these projects. This is one new thing. The other new thing is that all the InvestEU package is much more, so to say, green oriented. in the priorities, conditionalities, etc. I think it will have a big role. At the same time, we need to encourage public investment also at national level, and this has much to do with our fiscal rules. We have underway a review of our fiscal rules, and one of the issues that is always very much discussed is how can we encourage public investment. We know, unfortunately, that during the crisis, the level of public investment tend to decrease, and after the last crisis, even to near zero, because the net public investment in Europe was very near to zero after the last crisis. So how can we encourage public investment at national level? So first, how can we make InvestEU work properly? I think we have the right priorities and some new tools. Second, how can we encourage national public investment with our rules? And third, how can we again encourage private investment? I think there is a lot of availability in financial markets to invest in green purposes, and we are working also, as you know, with a taxonomy for green investment. And I think there is, I have seen it also before the lockdowns in several meetings, including in the famous Davos, that there is a lot of availability in financial institution and private institution and funds on the green transition. So without investment, what we are targeting, so the zero emission in 2050 would be impossible. And encouraging investment at European level, national level, and private level is key. On the timing, well, you can see actually from the reality from opposite point of views. Now, of course, from my point of view, well, there is something which is sure, that the reaction in taking decisions enabling member states to react, these decisions were taken in an ultra fast way. Between the 10th and the 20th of March, and they are still there. We adopted the general escape clause for our fiscal rules, the temporary state aid framework for state aid, and the ECB adopted their pandemic purchase program. This was decided in 10 days in March. Then, from my point of view, for example, the SURE mechanism has been a success story. You point out, and rightly so, that the Commission proposed it in March or beginning of April, and we and member state received the money in October. But I also know that we are discussing of this here in Brussels since 9 years, I think. And I think we were very effective in seizing the opportunity of this crisis for deciding something we were discussing about since 10 years. And it is interesting also to note two things. One, that 17 member states asked for support through this SURE mechanism, and two new ones are probably coming, so it will be 19, very strong number. And second, that our first emission in October 20th of common debt, it was for sure, and it was on social bonds, and it was oversubscribed 14 times, which means that the euro-denominated debt issuance coming from the Commission is very well received from financial markets. On the Recovery and Resilience Facility, I think that it's a commitment of every day. I really appreciate the effort of the German presidency, which is bringing the process on, negotiating with the parliament and finding solutions. I think we are quite there, and I hope that we will be able to receive the consensus of the parliament and then national ratification, and then in late spring of next year, beginning the approval of these plans. As you know, when we approve these resilience and recovery plans, we also disburse the first 10% of grants and loans for countries. So the Commission will issue a large amount of money, hundreds of billions, and this will have also consequences, I think, on the market. So I understand that timing could be considered a long one, but I also say, well, we are not a federal state. So the first move that we took enabled member states to take their decisions, and the decisions were obviously very quick and fast. But then we have, and this brings me to the last question, we have a common package that is exactly a package targeted to address the risk of excessive divergence. We have a crisis which is not caused by behavior of governments or member states. We have a crisis that is affecting every member state, maybe in this second wave even more than before, because the first wave was more a Western-Southern crisis in Europe, and this one is also affecting the eastern part and the central part of Europe very strongly. So we had this crisis affecting everyone, but with the risk of increasing divergence, and this is why we have a common tool that, of course, is also a tool of solidarity, because it is particularly helpful and useful for countries more affected by the pandemic and with higher level of debt. And this, I think, is a good contribution to try to reduce the risk of divergence. If we have too much divergence, our single market will be at risk. And this is why this unprecedented decision was taken. This is why France and Germany together and the Commission came with these absolutely ambitious proposals. Federica.
Thank you very much, Paolo. We have 15 minutes to go, and I would say more or less 15 questions. So I would try to read them all. Some of them probably you've already covered in some of your comments, but I would leave you the task of navigating through them and trying to answer most of the time we have left. So Niels, and by the way, I enjoy very much this role I have now of asking questions rather than giving answers. It's very relaxing. Niels asks, is the Commission concerned about the wide divergence in the amounts of funding of COVID aid schemes between member states and medium-term competitiveness of member states, especially with regards to greening the recovery? Could the European, Francesco asks, can the issuing of common debt be the European Hamiltonian moment and a step closer to European federation? Then Paul asks, we have seen a relatively calm and measured financial markets response to government debt levels that are once more very similar to 2011-2012. To what extent do you believe this is to attribute to a stronger perceived fiscal solidarity among Eurozone countries? Then we have Vincenzo that asks, well, first of all, thanks. Wait, I lost the line. I would ask our students to stop asking questions because we have a bit too many by now. Vincenzo thanks you and asks, how do you see the possible economic recovery from the COVID-19 crisis through the issuance of green bonds of the Green Deal? Then Sid Hamed asks, what's the focus of the Commission right now between a deal with the UK and the US and solving the economic crisis due to the COVID-19 pandemic? I guess this is about prioritization. Then Paul says, thank you, Mr. Gentiloni, for those very valuable insights. How do you intend to motivate reluctant countries, such as Poland, to transition towards a green economy? Do you think that positive incentives such as I'm losing the line, such as the Just Transition Fund are enough? And then Halem asks, well, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to have this talk. I want to ask, what fiscal policy do you think fits best in our situation? And what are the consequences for such a policy on the inflation rate and the consumers' purchasing power? And then Elena asks, well, she has a comment first. Recent ongoing debates at the national level, and especially in Italy, here comes a question on Italy, raise the question of the long time need for the actual allocation of the EU Recovery Fund to the EU member states. This somehow highlights the big existing gap between the national and European realities in terms of knowledge and understanding of the political processes of the Union. What political efforts shall be made, in your opinion, at the national level in order to better inform citizens about the practical aspects and benefits of the European Union response to the crisis? And then last couple of ones. Sorry, it's a lot. What are the future scenarios with the CFP with the UK, and what are the expected deals for you? I would say the last couple of ones, and then we close. This crisis has shown, this is Alexis that asks, this crisis has shown the limits of the SCP. Do you think that it can be re-implemented as it is, or does it need to be improved? If you think it needs to be improved, is there already some thoughts or reflection? And to conclude, Nicola, an Italian-Polish student at the College of Europe in Natolin, because we also have our students in Natolin connected to the talks. First of all, thank you. Thanks me and the Commissioner Gentiloni for the very interesting talk. My question is, what are at the current stage the possibilities to, and here it stops. I'm sorry, Nicola has interrupted writing, or maybe we have a connection problem with Natolin. I don't think it is the case, but I think, Paolo, you have quite enough questions for this last 10 minutes. I will try to recuperate maybe the question from Nicola, if we manage. Otherwise, I promise Nicola special treatment at MES talks. And Paolo, I give you the floor for this very long list of all interesting questions to you.
Yes, thank you, Federica. Well, Niels was asking again. I understand on the risk of divergence, of differences, different consequences, and also different firepower among member states in facing the crisis. Of course, this is a potential risk. We tried as a commission to introduce also new instruments. For example, we proposed a pan-European solvency instrument with a European fund to tackle with risk of insolvencies in companies in all member states, not only those with more firepower, so to say, but then in the negotiation with the Council, this proposal at the end was not adopted. I have to say that until now, well, first I have to say that we had an enormous effort coming from the DG competition to address the demands of member states to the request based on this new temporary state aid framework. Hundreds of requests were answered, but I have to say not in a extremely a different way. For the time being, several member states use this opportunity supporting their companies, and there is not a strong difference among the firepower used until now. This is not something that I can guess for the future, but until now it is, I think, there. And of course, we need a fiscal policy that until the level of the crisis and the impact in the economy is so hard, we should keep, if we want to avoid the increase of this divergence, we should keep a supportive fiscal stance for all member states. This is also answering to Halim's question. So we need to understand that this is the moment of supporting jobs, of supporting companies that are risking bankruptcy or insolvency, or moment of compensation for sectors of our economy more affected by this crisis and these lockdowns. And this is not finished with the summer. If someone was thinking of a V-shaped recovery, and so in summer the crisis was over and the recovery will come, he was wrong. So the fiscal policy that we need, at least for 2021 for sure, but in the future that we can see now with this crisis, is a supportive fiscal policy as a tool to also reduce the risk of divergence. Is this decision that we took of the issuance of common debt for common purposes a Hamiltonian moment? Francesco was asking. I've heard a lot of definition. Someone said a Copernican moment, some other a Rubiconian moment. Okay, I am saying we will see in 10 years from now. Now we have only...
It's a moment. It's already something.
It's a moment. It's a moment, and we need to implement this and to keep the decisions in the limits they were taken, and the limit is that this is a extraordinary decision. Then, of course, we know that if it works, it will also create something new in our building. But this is not the moment, from my point of view, in my position, to give such definition. On the financial markets, we have a few questions. Why are financial markets stable now? As you know, the interest rates are even decreasing in the last months, despite the level of debt, which is very high. I would say because of first, the fact that there is the awareness that this is a common crisis, not determined by behavior of this or that country or government. Second, because we had this very strong and fast reaction from the European institutions, beginning by the ECB, of course. And third, because this European solidarity, the fact that we are going to the markets issuing a common debt is so unprecedented a demonstration of solidarity that it has given to the financial markets the impression that Europe is acting very strongly in this crisis. Of course, nothing of this is forever, and so we have to continue. We know that in the medium term, if we have long-lasting crisis, we will have financial difficulties, and so the common commitment remains absolutely important. And in this financial situation, the issuing of the Commission will be very interesting. We had good results on social bonds, and also what Vincenzo was asking, the green bonds will be very important. We decided to have 30% of this resilience and recovery facility financed through green bonds, and this, I think, will give also a boost at a global level, not only of euro-denominated safe assets, but also on green bonds. Then we had a couple of questions about the one question on the transition, the climate transition, coming from Paul. Well, we know that this process is challenging, but we should not, from my point of view, give the impression that the challenge is there for one country and not for others. Of course, there is in some countries, you were mentioning Poland, some special challenges. And we have also, as you remembered in your question, conceived an instrument, this Just Transition Fund and mechanism, targeted to help particular areas and particular sectors which are more in difficulty in the transition. But this problem is there in Poland, like in Portugal, in Germany, like in Italy, because we have manufacturing sectors, we have areas of different countries that will have strong challenges in this transition. And then we have countries with perhaps bigger problems like Poland, and we are working to help. Then we had a couple of questions by Sid Hamed and another person. I didn't get its or her name on UK Brexit, a deal with UK or recovery. Well, I don't see any contradiction between these two issues. I know that Michel Barnier is working very hard and very honestly in trying to reach this deal, and I'm sure then that reaching this deal would be of help in these difficult economic times, both for UK and for EU, but this cannot be a deal at any cost, because we cannot accept the idea that you leave the European Union and then you can have access to the single market without any of the common level playing field that we are supporting. So the discussion is going on. I am not, and I'm very happy of this, steering this discussion, and I'm sure that Michel Barnier will give us the news in the next few days or weeks. And finally, if I'm not wrong, there was a question on the future coming from Alexis, the future of our Stability and Growth Pact. I think that we have an opportunity because the review of these rules was already underway, because we launched a review and we were obliged to launch it after 10 years in January this year, a few weeks before the pandemic. Then this review was, of course, put on hold now in these weeks, but I am sure that we have to discuss the way to improve our common rules. We need these rules. The idea that we can have a fiscal policy without common rules is a completely misleading idea. We need these rules, but we can, working hard to build consensus, have simpler and less pro-cyclical and more adapted to the situation that we will live after the pandemic rules. And I will work for that for sure. Federica, grazie.
Grazie, Paolo. If you allow me one last second, because I received the question, the famous question from Nicola, an Italian Polish student who is in Natolin, and this is a question that to which I think you can answer with just one word. What are the current stage, the possibilities to add the discussed rule of law clause to the forthcoming EU budget? Are the veto threats realistic?
Well, I think that the negotiator of the Parliament and the Council reached 3 or 4 days ago an agreement. I understand that there are some member states that are not happy with this agreement, but I think that this agreement is very realistic, and I am quite confident that we can go on this basis.
Grazie mille. Thank you so much, Paolo. It has been extremely interesting. I think it has been for our students, but also for our broader audience, a good opportunity to hear from you. I'm really grateful for your availability. I know that it's busy times, but we really enjoyed it. And I'm particularly proud that we launched this series of talks with you. So thanks again, grazie, and I wish you a good continuation of your work. Grazie mille.
Ciao, grazie.
Best. Ciao.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Goodbye.